and this is the continuing series of QA, sort of HR, I guess you would call it, human resources, bringing QA and maintaining QA. This is the fourth in our series for that, and I am here with Evan Bates from MANTEC, as we've done with the past, and I'm going to allow Evan to introduce himself as we get started.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, so I'm part of MANTEC, who is a MEP center. We are a industrial resource center for manufacturers in the South Central PA region. We are part of a larger network, part of the NIST MEP network, as I mentioned. There's a center in every single state. There's a couple centers in multiple states, and our only role is to be a resource for manufacturers. So everything from sales and marketing assistance through process improvement, automation, and workforce engagement, like we're going to be talking about today. If you don't know about your local MEP center, I invite you to reach out to me directly. If you're in the South Central PA region, we will be your resource here, connecting you with resources like Kellerman Consulting and other areas as well. And if you're not, feel free to reach out to me as well, and I'll connect you with your local resource center that you can contact for any services that you might need within your business to help you grow. And a huge thank you to the Kellerman Consulting team. This has been a fantastic series. I learned something every time they put this a new one on, and we're just pleased to be partnered with them for this. And that I'll turn it over to you, Brian.
Thank you very much, Evan. I mentioned in the past, I always like to say this at the start of these presentations, the MEP process, MANTEC, and the other organizations in the MEP system are really and truly an essential part of helping businesses in America, food businesses and otherwise, grow, establish themselves, and it really does push things forward. They are a really helpful resource, and we cannot recommend that enough that businesses pursue reaching out to MEPs whenever they need help. We try to guide them that way whenever we can. So thank you, Evan. All right, so let's get started here. This is the fourth presentation that we've done. The previous presentations have been about how to bring QA people in, how to hire, how to interview people when you get folks in your business. If you want to elevate them, bring QA from other parts of your business, how that's done. And we've defined what QA responsibilities are. All those videos are up on our website, and I believe MANTEC has them as well. So if you want to go back and look at those videos, they are available. In this episode, or in this webinar, we're going to talk about how to keep those QA people happy and how senior management really fits into that process. We're really going to talk about QA and senior management in tandem for this discussion, because ultimately QA, quality assurance work, whether there is an actual QA department or whether people have that responsibility within an organization, QA has a source of power over other employees when you're going and checking other people's work and defining what is conforming, what is correct in a business and what is not correct, what is not conforming. And QA also has a tremendous amount of obligations and really a responsibility for presentation of information within the business and to any regulators and certifying bodies. And ultimately, senior management really is a crucial part of making sure that QA functions properly. So we're going to talk a lot about how those things interact. As we get started, I do want to mention there is a brochure that's available in the handout section of this webinar if anyone needs to see that. Phoebe has put up a link to the MEP site if you are looking in the chat section. For anyone who's here, if you have questions while we're going, I mention this every time, but I love answering questions. I love getting them. And if you have anything that brings to mind questions while I'm talking, please feel free to type it into the chat function, and I'll try to address those as we go. So how do we keep QA folks happy? How do we keep that morale up? How do we keep our quality assurance work in a productive and helpful mode for our business at all times? We're going to look at that, how to run sort of an operation, or at least in general terms, how you structure that interaction between senior management and QA to make sure that in larger QA operations, we have continuity, function, and folks that are engaged in a healthy and productive way. And I am going to show you folks, we're going to talk a little bit about Kellerman Consulting, a QA consulting business. I promise you that I'm going to have the good and bad. So this is not going to be a sales pitch for Kellerman Consulting or anything like that. However, we deal with these issues and it is QA centric. So we're going to talk about the factory work, but we're going to talk about what we see as well. So you can see a window into what I deal with, what we deal with as senior management at Kellerman Consulting, where we have QA projects. So at the beginning here, we have a basic starting point of where does morale, and here we're going to define morale as the intention of quality assurance folks to do good work, to pay close attention to the data that is being collected, the forms that are being filled out, making sure that programs are run, meetings are being conducted on time, the whether we want to call it enthusiasm or at least the positive intention to get everything done, that is derived ultimately from leadership. So hopefully, if I have any folks that have leadership roles that are listening to this, I would highly recommend getting a mirror and looking in it and really thinking through, as a senior manager, how are you supporting QA folks? And when we think about what that means, I do want to start here by saying we are going to actually talk about two different concepts that happen simultaneously and are a constant struggle for senior management and QA. And that is holding QA accountable. So that means that senior management is actually watching what quality assurance is doing, actually overseeing the oversight role, if you will, making sure that quality assurance is performing a authentic and correct actions, and they're doing it according to the scheduled operations and scheduled intent of senior management, and balancing that accountability with support. And the dual function of support and accountability is ultimately going to undergird what we talk about here. We cannot hold someone accountable and contradict or stifle them, so we have to be supportive. We also need to prop up, let the other employees know that quality assurance, or the folks that have that responsibility, have the support of leadership and that they're not being left alone to do those things. And it's a very difficult balancing act that we're going to get into. So leadership should be connected on a day-to-day basis. Leadership should be paying close attention, at least to very specific parts of operations. Now, it's very difficult to lead a company. It's hard to run a business. There's lots of things going on. It is not the responsibility of leadership to duplicate the role of quality assurance management. You can and should delegate quality assurance to knowledgeable people, but there should be a constant checking on a regular basis. And here I would say at least once a week, to make sure that the people that you have delegated quality assurance responsibilities, the signing of documents, the creation of specifications or certificates of testing, liaison with suppliers, with customers, key stakeholders, that those things are being done in a way that is intended by senior management, and that senior management is supporting the honest and effective communication with all those people. Engaged leadership, as we put here, that is what ultimately allows QA people to function with breathing room, to feel confident in the way that they are overseeing a program, interacting with folks, generating documents. When senior management is present, when that support and accountability is balanced correctly, businesses generally have very healthy quality assurance departments, or people that perform that role if it's not a defined department. And generally, businesses that are able to accomplish that see tremendous control over their operations, and where there's a good business model, quite a bit of growth. So the features for what QA employees need for satisfaction. So what is required here by a business to make sure that things are functioning properly? We have someone as typed in, so let me take a quick look and see if I can't respond to that. So we have Eric, who has said that he has found in his as his role as QC management, it's quite difficult to get high-level management to not only hold me accountable, but actively engage in my department. Oh, Eric, well, now you got me riled up. So let's talk about that. Let's break that down really quick. I want to address to that point, which is something that I really did want to speak about. In businesses that have disengaged or at least partially engaged senior management, we don't want to cast aspersions here, but Eric, most likely in a business structure like you're seeing, and this is quite common out there in the world, people think, hey, I've got a quality control person, I've got a QA person, I let them do it. I don't want to do that. You know, without knowing the specifics of where you're working or what you're dealing with, I bet it's really boring. And we're going to get to that. QA, QC, it's tedious and boring. And what we find is that people in positions of authority, generally speaking, once they find a person who does a good job and they feel like they trust them, it's like out of sight, out of mind. I don't want to deal with that. They let you deal with it. But that's exactly what we're talking about here. That what is missing is support to know, hey, that VP or the C-level person is actually going to show up and listen to what I have to say and back me up to problematic employees or where there are difficulties understanding what the business model is. QA and QC do not have the authority to tell people this is how this business is being run. All we can do is say, listen, we have scheduled actions. It's my job to check and make sure that those actions are properly functioned and that forms are signed and training is being performed correctly and people know what they're doing. That little extra piece cannot come from the quality assurance or quality control personnel. So I feel you very much. My hope in giving this presentation is to help folks in senior management think through that. And for you in a QA or QC role, how can we approach senior management and ask for some of these things? And hopefully, Eric, that what we talk about might help a little bit on that. To take it back, just to finish up with this slide, that accountability is one of the most important things. I put it on this slide here. Eric mentioned that he doesn't feel like he's being held accountable at times with his job. And ultimately, that is a crucial piece of how to get that balance right with the people who are trying to make sure the business runs properly and who they report to. When you, as a QA person, generate, or a QC person in this case, when you generate your forms or reports, when you conduct internal audits or go walk the line, do weight checks, whatever those things are, when those things are logged in and no one looks at them and no one sees it, what often happens is people get sort of complacent about it. Gets a little bit sloppy. Sometimes those tasks need to be fit into other things and they get pushed back, and we get things like pencil whipping or going back after the fact and just like plugging data in. And most of the time we might get away with that and it might be okay, but it only takes that one time for there to be a mishap. And now senior management comes in after not being involved, and fingers get pointed, and you end up with quite a bit of conflict, as opposed to having regular interactions in which the people in charge say, hey, at least, I'm here with you. I'm listening to what you have to say. They don't have to do the QA or QC role themselves, but listening to what's going on is really important to demonstrate that they're involved. And then furthermore, to let everyone else know through action and through deed, through words, that when QA and QC speak and when there are attempts to maintain the structure of the business, that it isn't just one employee, and it's not just someone who's either other employees may feel that you're above your role or getting into things that don't involve you. That we get that a lot for QA and QC. I put here the last bit, this politics-free leadership. When we have unaccountable folks, when senior management kind of swoops in at the last minute, what we often find is this politics. Who gets along with the boss better? who has done the best job trying to make themselves seen as good employees matters far more than what actually went wrong and how can we effectively fix it. That's that accountability, and that's the support and being present, where senior management can say, I know what I've been seeing over the last few weeks or months, and that will help inform decision making. It avoids politics entering into this. Who has more clout, or who has a personality that is more influential? With QA and QC, we really want to get rid of that as much as we can, because ultimately we're talking about running the business based on scheduled actions, on metrics, and on expectations that hopefully come, again, from a healthy interaction with senior management. Before we jump back, we will go back into factory work for food and non-food businesses, but this is, as I promised, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my business, but I want to think through, like, where are our problems? Because we deal with this the same way that anyone else has to deal with these issues. So what I've started here are the good things about Kellerman Consulting. These are the things that we have tried to put into place that we feel very good about as leadership when we think about how we are keeping or trying to keep QA folks happy and keep morale high at our business, which for us means having projects, consulting projects. And we have our team, which you can see in that picture, 7 of whom are consultants, and that includes myself. We have a incredibly flat organizational structure. We do have a leadership team. We have 4 folks that are in leadership, but ultimately speaking, everyone's at pretty much the same level. And that's, to my mind, a wonderful thing. I'm very proud of that at my business. I work alongside my colleagues as a consultant. Where we have to take leadership actions, I do have authority, and I am the boss, and I don't pretend to be otherwise. However, when it comes to who does a project or how it gets done, my colleagues doing it and myself doing it, there is no real distinction. We're trying to do a great job, and anyone who does it is appreciated, and we try to do that equally. We do have a profit share program. So that's something that, as we are successful, our employees do see those funds, and we try to make sure that there is a fair share of that. On top of that, we do a yearly bonus structure to try to encourage people to do a good job. Now, that's the pay side of it. And as I've mentioned in previous webinars, we don't pretend to say that QA and QC do not need to be paid well, and that is important. Beyond that, for our work structure, one of the benefits that Kellerman Consulting has is we have a very flexible structure. People are given their assignments and they're told, get it done. Now, many businesses really functionally operate like that. We don't have an office, so there's no commute, and people are really given the day to do things as they need. We do work Monday through Friday, so there isn't necessarily a lot of weekend work. Now, granted, and we'll get into the negatives, but like, it can be stressful when someone's going through an audit and it's 7 o'clock at night on the East Coast and someone's on the West Coast finishing an audit. That means you're going to have to take that call. To go with that, we, again, are remote. So that's really helpful for us. And for people who like that, that's been good. Now, we provide constant interactions with leadership, and we provide training, and we encourage our team to go get trained, and we emphasize teamwork. Those things have kept our employees seemingly reasonably happy. I can tell you that the people in that picture, some of them have worked with us for 5 years. Most everyone has been here for at least a year, and we have not really lost a lot of employees. So we do feel very good that we've done a decent job retaining QA, QC people, in this case as consultants. However, and here we can talk about where the problems really are, or can be for us. We have lost employees. There's not everyone has stayed. Candidly, we have terminated far more employees than have ever left, and we do have very high standards, and not everyone has always been able to meet those standards consistently throughout their time at our company, as we would expect for any functioning business. But where folks have expressed discontent, where we are constantly at risk for not having folks stay at our business, we did have an employee previously who wanted to work less. They wanted part-time work. We don't offer that. And so ultimately that person was not able to come to terms with how we function in our business, and that didn't work out. Beyond that, that was a specific instance, and that involved their personal life. In general terms, what we find, not everyone likes remote work. A lot of people like going to the office. There is a social component. There is a structural component that is really important to a certain type of person. And admittedly, I'm not that person. So when it came time to work remotely, I couldn't wait. And I used to work in an office, and I was a high school teacher. I worked in a school, and I enjoyed colleagues, but I didn't like commuting. I don't like it. I don't like cars. I don't like driving all that much. And so for me, remote work is wonderful, but that's not always the case. And we have to be extra sensitive to our employees that don't necessarily thrive under remote environments. Now, in a factory setting, which is what we're expecting that we're talking about here for most of the audience, that's probably the opposite concern. Most people don't always want to come to work all the time and would like to do remote work. But I can tell you that when it's 100% remote, it kind of comes back the other way. As I mentioned with QA and QC, we do QA and QC work, and you better believe it is also very tedious and it's very repetitive. When we are helping people do GFSI projects, well, those are fixed manuals. So it's the same requirements for each facility. We get to spice it up and we get to customize it for each facility. But ultimately, once you've read all the way through an SQF manual or an ISO 9001 manual, you've already read it. And that second time through, and the third time through, and the fourth time through, the novelty wears off. To take it back to your work in a facility, doing QA, QC, it's exciting to learn a job. It is very exciting to get mastery of a quality assurance work, to know what forms need to be filled out, to be able to answer your colleagues' questions when relabeling comes up or rework needs to be performed, or we've had a nonconformance and we need to fill out a nonconformance report. When we lead an effective training or meeting, that stuff is wonderful in year one. But year 2, year 3, year 4, and you've already given that same training 5 times, that is really challenging to stay heavily motivated. Certainly in businesses where senior management is not necessarily showing you they care one way or the other, it can become really difficult. And basically, it can ruin an ability to do that work. For us at Kellerman Consulting, when we assign tasks, when we are talking to people about this job, leadership tries very hard to emphasize that tedious repetitiveness, because that's reality. And that is something that we as senior management, I have to constantly be vigilant about when I'm trying to support and hold people accountable, is understanding that, like, are you having a tough time getting through stuff that I know you can do because it's just boring and you've done it a lot? Is there anything we can do? Those are important questions, but we have to be engaged. Senior management has to be involved in order to make those things happen. Lastly, I do want to mention, as much as I said, hey, we give bonuses, we do profit shares, great. Well, we also don't pay as well necessarily as in factory work. And so no matter how much generosity I may think that I'm providing and that we leadership may feel we are providing, somebody who wants to just flat out make more money, that doesn't like remote work and just wants to get paid more, there's not a whole lot we can do to stop that, or not even stop it, but to contend with that. And much like in any factory work, those forces with your QA people are always at work here. And trying to be realistic about them and trying to monitor who might be susceptible to leaving is really crucial for senior management. Again, that senior management QA dynamic. And I do want to say quickly, it's not in the slides, but it's come up for me in some recent projects, which is continuity. And that is absolutely essential in a properly functioning QA department, whether it's a food factory that has regulatory and certification responsibilities, whether it's industrial facilities that may have customer orders and ISO 9001 responsibilities or something like that, or other ISO programs. That continuity, to have someone who leaves, if there's QA and QC work, if forms are being filled out, if nonconformances or complaints are handled by a person and they leave. A lot of times what we see in not well-run businesses that are struggling to keep hold of those quality assurance responsibilities, is that when key people leave, nobody knows what they're really doing. And so there is a mad scramble to try to understand what those tasks were and recreate them. And again, here, senior management involvement, just having a basic understanding. Hey, when we do these corrective actions, I usually see like 2 or 3 people are here. The boss doesn't have to know exactly how that works, but like even just knowing these are the 3 people I've always seen involved, and like 1 person left. So are we going to replace that person, or can the 2 of you handle it? A boss that's engaged is the only one that's really going to be able to ask those very important questions when change happens, when people come and go out of an organization. So now that we're looking at this slide and we're thinking about what a supportive leadership actually looks like, we're going to spend a couple minutes talking about what is supportive leadership. I've mentioned this accountability and support. So what does that look like? What can senior managers do to achieve both of those things and calibrate themselves properly on that? Well, senior managers can actually show up to some of the meetings. And I'm going to tell you now, and this may not be a popular view, but when senior management doesn't show up to a meeting, I mean, granted, sometimes senior management are like the salespeople, and sometimes they are managing higher level relationships that are crucial to a business. And that is indisputable that happens a lot. But I have to tell you that most of the time the senior management doesn't show up to the meeting, they just didn't feel like it, and no one can make them. And that's not a good excuse. And you won't hear a lot of people say that, but it's the truth that senior management can always show up to a meeting. There isn't, unless there are absolutely crucial travel or business, sales, financial things that have to be done in that moment. Most of the senior management responsibilities can be adjusted, and senior managers can show up to meetings. And when they do, being in the meeting by itself speaks extraordinary volumes about how important that meeting is. And I cannot stress enough that the presence of a boss in a meeting by itself, you're done. I don't even care if that person's on their phone clickety clacking away and barely paying attention. If they're in that meeting, something important is communicated. When senior management's involved, we really want to make sure, and this again, showing up is accountability. So on the support side of it though, if senior management shows up, it would be incredibly helpful, and is, if they know the lingo of the facility. What do we call things around here? How do we refer to parts of the building? The way that trucks are docked in our building, like even little things like that, and interior knowledge of that, which is usually pretty knowable for senior management. We don't see too much issues on that. But equipment names, employee names, basic equipment realities, what breaks a lot, what's our best pieces of equipment, those things, being able to be in a meeting and actually having that requisite knowledge is a way to show support. Not contradicting QA. I cannot stress this enough. And we do see this in our facilities. It's not all that common, thankfully, but when the boss shows up in sandals and flip-flops and wanders around the back chewing gum in a facility, like in a food facility where no one else is allowed to do that, the message being sent is the opposite of support and the opposite of accountability. If I'm not, as the boss, going to hold myself accountable, you can guarantee the behavior of the people that see you doing that is going to be not all that strict and not all that conforming to the rules mattering. So when we think about support, it is generally going to be following the rules, showing up, having basic knowledge of the business, and being able to listen to QA and effectively understand what is being said. Also, not interrupting, not belittling, not contradicting verbally during a meeting. Cannot stress enough, when QA speaks about something that they have seen on the floor and they're bringing it back into a meeting, or they are out on the floor talking to people, a person who is above them in the org chart contradicting or saying, I don't agree with this, never mind, it only takes 1 or 2 of those events to really undermine it. Lindsay is asking a question here, and she is asking for any recommendations to involve the entire facility in food safety culture. And she says, let me be clear, a small facility employing less than 20 people. Lindsay, let me be clear. This is a wonderful question, and it doesn't matter the size of your facility. And And I'm so glad you asked about culture, because I hope that you can see I have not even used the word food safety culture or any culture of any kind, safety or quality, because ultimately what I'm talking about is those things, even if we didn't name it. So how do we bring that into quality? Well, again, or into a culture? Well, as I've mentioned, actions and words are the foundation of it, and those are irreplaceable. So having senior management show up is the culture. That right there. I mean, there is no replacement for that. To bolster it, I always tell our clients, you cannot have enough signage in the facility. Good, effective signage that is up in the back is a good starting point. You know, larger facilities, and Lindsay, I want to make sure we speak to smaller companies as well that may not have the capital expenditures that some of the larger businesses do. When I see the televisions up and they have like the production for the day and they have a rotating cycle of messages, I love to see that. Any facility of any size can slap a sign up. And this doesn't have to be the sort of like teamwork signs and it has the kittens that are all kind of playing with a ball or something like that. We don't need that kind of signage, but any messages that can be referred to, what the allergens are, correct wearing of PPE, reminding people what safety looks like, pictures of hoses off the ground with a big smiley face next to it, pictures with the same hose on the ground uncapped with a big X through it. Those things enhance a culture. Ultimately, when you are effectively administering a quality assurance program, if it's part of a certification scheme or just if it's something that you folks are trying to do, and when you are effectively implementing that program and you have a culture, your responsibility is to effectively measure or evaluate that culture. So my recommendation is always with culture, the boss has to do it. It starts from the top. Any business where the boss is not doing culture, is not the person who is the lead in building that culture, is going to have tremendous currents that you're running up against. You're going to have problems. Where there is effective leadership, a culture should spring up somewhat on its own. QA and QC people's job is to evaluate that. That is maybe in the form of surveys. It may be in the form of rewards. It may be in the form of meals for the whole facility, bringing everyone together and letting everyone know that we are in it together. I've always, my simple thing is gift cards for people who find errors. Those are the things that start to really make the mind spin. A gift card from the boss, rewarding and notifying people that one of our employees found a nonconformance and they saved this business a bunch of money and time. Those are the things that are irreplaceable for culture. And Lindsay, to go along with this slide and for everyone else, this is something that I have harped on in other videos I've done and education series that are on our website. But I want to stress here the senior management walkthrough, which again, just showing up to a meeting, just showing up and being there says something. Knowing your employees' names, equipments, and whatnot. When a senior manager, when a vice president, an executive, a CEO walks through operations, with or without something to write down, but preferably with a notepad and pencil, that right there is foundational to a very healthy culture. It is the foundation also of that accountability and support. When I, as a boss, do a walkthrough of a factory, I am holding QA accountable because I'm going to find out if they are seeing what is right or not right in the facility. I'm also going to be supporting them because when I do my walkthrough and they do their walkthrough also, it is communicating through action to all the employees that the people in charge are going to be coming out here. So I need to be thinking and I need to be on my toes doing my tedious job on the line because somebody's going to be coming out here and it could very well be the people running this company. So the senior management walkthrough is in many ways the easiest way to get to that culture and the easiest way to help unify senior management and QA and QC. And it may, in many ways, be more effective than having them show up to those meetings. But those two things, when we think about it, there's nothing scientifically significant about this or technically difficult about those actions. And where they are done in a business, I mean, I would put, if I knew a business had a structure like that, I would expect to see success for that business in whatever they're doing. And again, sometimes business models make things difficult, so it's not always a guarantee, but those are the types of actions that when we see it with our clients, we really feel like whatever project that we're being involved in is probably going to lead to some success. So with these walkthroughs, visibility, you don't need to sneak around. You want to show yourself as senior management if that's what you're doing, and maybe coordinate with QA in terms of what's the pathway that you like to take. What are you looking for? And this is to the QA and QC manager, trying to duplicate those things. But that's not even necessary. Just showing up, just going through the walkthrough is absolutely crucial. Very importantly, though, as I mentioned about contradicting QA, the rules need to be followed. A walkthrough is going to be a destructive act if QA and QC people are doing a walkthrough and pointing things out and asking for conformance to behavior, and senior management walkthrough either ignores those things, doesn't know what those things are, or says you don't need to follow those rules. That would not be a very good thing. That would be destructive to a culture of safety and quality. The senior management, when they do the walkthrough, they need to follow the rules for the facility. So if you need to put on special equipment to do a walkthrough, senior management needs to put on that special equipment. There needs to be the gloves, the hat, the bouffant is the one that covers the whole face. Yeah, that's what you guys wear. Wear them. They call them snoods in England, the beard nets, those things. If you got a beard and you need to go out and do a senior walkthrough, put a beard net on. Safety glasses, any of those things, earplugs, whatever your facility has. Senior management doing the walkthrough, again, a perfect opportunity to demonstrate conformance to proper behavior. And it's incredible when the boss does that stuff. Obviously QA should be doing it, and usually does when there is a QA walkthrough. But it helps so much. Here we mentioned get a notebook, write stuff down. Again, that's support and accountability. A senior manager writing stuff down and bringing those observations, not necessarily belittling or questioning QA, but saying, this is what I saw. I like this. I don't like this. Is there something we can fix? Is there other ways for us to handle things? That is a very powerful message, and can really help spark improvements in a facility coming, again, from both senior management and QA. And again, bringing those questions, that is for folks that are interested in improving culture. There is probably no better or more effective way to achieve that outcome. Along with these walkthroughs, which I cannot stress enough, wonderful. I do want to say before we get into these meetings, imagine a facility where there are no walkthroughs. Easy to imagine because most facilities that we interact with, there are little to no walkthroughs. Production does what production does. QA collects forms at the end of the day, signs off on them. That's it. We have confusion in the back, a lot of non-conformances. No one ever writes those down, of course, because no one really knows that they're happening. A lot of contradictory supervision on the lines, and frankly, businesses not understanding why key processes and key projects don't get to a successful outcome each and every time they're tried. Conversely, with 2 to 3 walkthroughs a day, you can't imagine how much easier it is for the people in a facility to operate properly when, again, we know at some point in this day, the people who are in charge are going to see what we're doing. And gosh, they might even say, thank you. Oh, nothing better. Okay, so these management meetings, we're moving ourselves out of the back of the facility and into the front in our administrative offices. Management meetings, of course, are required for anyone that is involved in certification projects. So ISO 9001 or GFSI, GMP audits, maybe. If you're kind of in a halfway point, if you don't have a full international standard you're applied to, you may or may not need to have management meetings. But to go along with these questions of like, what does a culture look like? Well, culture really does mean trainings and meetings. and management being a part of those meetings. As I mentioned, when they don't show up, it's because they didn't feel like showing up. When they're there, it's because it's important for them to be there and they know it. It is essential. These meetings, when you think about the boss or senior management scheduling meetings, bringing people in, sitting them down, having an agenda, questions to ask, things that we're looking for regularly to evaluate if our business is being run correctly. Those are the ways to make sure that we have, again, both accountability and support. And when we ask, where have we been this past week, month, whatever, year, we are trying to make sure that we understand, since our last good check, that we are not losing continuity. Again, if people have left or changed roles, are we making sure we're still doing things? Are initiatives being followed up on? Do we document improvements? Are we checking up that things that have been ordered showed up on time? Now, I will say quickly that what we see most often in industrial facilities, but also food factories, are like daily production meetings. And if your facility engages in daily production meetings, fantastic. And those things are great. And to me, the bottom line is where the GM, plant manager, or C-level shows up to those production meetings, you are getting a bare level essential, sort of meeting the needs of having senior management involvement. I will say that production meetings, especially daily production meetings, are not always the best venue to have a dedicated senior management meeting, because ultimately people consider those production meetings just to sort of be the daily, like, giving of essential information for the day. And they oftentimes, when it comes to the higher level quality assurance or quality control actions, those get touched very quickly. And there may be a quick report from maintenance about a preventive maintenance action that had to get delayed for multiple days. And those are very important. We don't want to dismiss that. However, a dedicated HACCP team meeting, a dedicated KPI meeting, a dedicated corrective action or internal audit response meeting, those things really on the calendar, on the schedule, separate of daily production meetings, elevate what is being discussed, those parts of the program, as crucial. And so where you're doing production meetings, I do recommend thinking about having a separate set of meetings. We don't want to overload everyone's time, but certainly once a month is not asking too much for a 45-minute meeting to kind of review crucial things. We do recommend at least once a month. And again, for ISO programs, that's not a requirement. That's once a year management meeting is essential and required in that code. For GFSI programs, SQF, BRCGS, you do see monthly requirements. I don't think FSSC even tells you have to do it monthly, but we recommend monthly. That is a checkup from the neck up. Are we doing okay here? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Everything going okay? Is there any basic stuff that we should be aware of? That's your monthly meeting. You still need to have, in a really well-run QA, QC, and senior management relationship, a yearly assessment of the whole program. That is required in all of the higher level certification schemes. But the monthly meetings between QA and senior management, we cannot stress that as a good practice enough. You can always meet more than that. I mean, there's nothing holding you back for it. However, anybody that's got that on the books, there is, again, a gateway for that accountability and support to be ongoing. So what are the topics, if we're going to do these management meetings? What are regular or good topics to consider? Non-conformances that have occurred since the last meeting. So if I'm meeting once a month, then there might be anywhere between 1 to 25 non-conformances, depending on how we track non-conformances. We want to go over those and talk about if there's significance. Maybe not every single one if we don't have time, but certainly trends, key non-conformances, anything involving critical safety or quality steps where we've seen errors. Customer complaints, those should always be discussed as part of those non-conformances if a customer complaint involves a non-conformance. Any audit result, this is crucial. And this one is where in all of the programs, you really always should have a senior management meeting, following any audits, any inspections. So as anyone who's worked in a food facility knows, those inspections come unannounced. Unless you are in an FSI's facility, then obviously you know they're going to be there most days, if not every day. But for FDA or state regulated facilities, it could be once every other year, could be once a year, maybe. Anytime those occur, there should be a schedule. I mean, it should be absolutely like understood that within a week or so, ideally that day, the next day, something like that, we're going to have a meeting, but no later than say like within the week to review, even if it's been a good inspection. Those things are really important to talk about. Any internal audits we do, any customer audits or external audits of any kind, military, if you service the military and you get a DOD or an Army audit, any kind of actions, review actions, there should be a management meeting to discuss it. What happened here? Did this go okay? Did it not? Those things are absolutely crucial. And there should be a discussion involving senior management after those events. It should be pretty much a non-negotiable. If it's up to me, there's no discussion about discussing those things. We should be doing that, and it's just best practice. If we have KPIs, and we should, any key performance indicators, we should be reviewing those at senior management meetings. And again, once a month to talk about, are we meeting our KPIs? In a properly run business, that's a very short discussion, because if I have a key performance indicator, the thing that can't go wrong, then every month I should be getting nods and smiles and thumbs up, because those things are still being done. They're key. We can't not do those things. And I just want to make sure that we are. And of course, we reference nonconformances at the top of the slide. Any nonconformance involving a key performance indicator should be an immediate senior management meeting. There should be no doubt about it. If we have any improvement projects, ongoing construction, new equipment that's going to show, new products we're going to launch, those things should be discussed regularly at those scheduled management meetings. Confirmation that dates are being met, that QA and QC has prepared their documents for new initiatives, for changes in the facility. Maybe presentations on those things. Again, from a support and accountability standpoint, having the boss schedule a meeting, or bosses, and say, hey, let's talk about these initiatives, present to us where we are on these things. That sends a wonderful message. We only have a few minutes left. I want to sum up with the time remaining before I bring Evan back up. Give it about five minutes or so to sum up not just what we talked about here, but tie it back to all of the presentations that we have talked about, at least at a higher level. The main takeaway that I started with from the very beginning of the first presentation in this series is that QA is a uniquely challenging set of tasks, whether it's a department or a set of actions, because it involves scientific understanding, because it involves record keeping. A lot of times there's some math involved, there's graphing, there are the performing of regulated actions like nonconformances, understanding allergens, things like that. It's technically challenging, so it is not for everyone. And anyone that can be found in an organization to perform those tasks and do a good job of it, the value to the business is tremendous. And each one of those people really is foundational to the business functioning well. You'll often hear quality is everyone's responsibility, and that is undeniable. The people on the line are just as responsible as the people who are following behind, making sure those things are done correctly. But someone with technical expertise to do quality work, it's different than someone who is manning a oven or a fill machine and making sure it's running right. The QA person is, generally speaking, managing higher level tasks. It's really hard to find those people. I mentioned that Kellerman Consulting, we have our pluses and minuses. When we go to hire, we might get 500-600 applications and talk to 3 or 4 people. And that's not an insult to the people who apply. It's really, really hard to find good QA people with the requisite experience. It's a huge challenge. So any of you that are having difficulties with that, you are not alone. Quite the opposite. We see it all over. We experience it. We talked about the fact that because of that reality, every organization needs to be creative in thinking how those responsibilities are going to be fulfilled. it's lovely to get to work with a facility that, Lindsay mentioned in her question that when you have a small facility with 20 people, finding someone who is a QA person or going to take on those responsibilities, that is not easy to do. It's more pleasant to work with a huge company that has a defined quality assurance department, maybe a quality control department separate of that. Wonderful, right? An internal lab that has all the tests that can be run and that's completely independent of production and has leadership. That's great when it's there, but that's not a requirement to a very well-run business. A well-run business has people who are responsible for quality assurance and control actions, supported by management, and working towards continually assessing themselves, assessing the business's ability to meet its expectations. You don't need more than 5 to 10 people to have an incredibly well-run business. You don't need 500 or 5,000. It's nice when you have some of those resources available, but by no means is that prerequisite. When you find any of those people, the creativity of getting someone into those responsibilities, finding someone who can do QA, who can do those QC things and do an effective job, they need continuous support. And that support can only come from support above them, senior management. That is not going to come below. It is great when QA and production get along. It is very helpful in a business, but to get the support and accountability, it comes from above, not at the same level and not below. And lastly, companies that have great quality assurance departments do not regret it. Everywhere we go, every client I've worked with, when quality assurance work is done effectively, I don't hear them say, I really wish we were doing less quality assurance work, or I really wish we didn't have this many engaged people doing quality work. That is not a thing. And as a result of that, these actions we take, this is not easy what we've talked about. It's not something you snap your fingers and solve these problems quickly. But any business that gets their arms wrapped around this really can expect to see some kind of operational success. Again, the only caveat being you have to have a business model that produces some kind of revenue and hopefully profit. But a strong QA function within the organization is the recipe for that. So that gets us here to the end. I feel pretty good about this discussion. We're going to bring Evan back up. And I've thrown a lot at you. If anybody has any questions, if you want access to either of us for the next 10 minutes or 8 minutes, I guess, until the top of the hour, we're going to give folks a couple minutes to think through if they want to ask questions. We're only going to wait for a minute or two. If anyone has any, we'll answer them. Otherwise, we will wind this thing down and let you get on your way. So give it that a minute or so. If anyone has questions or anything, please let us know.
I'm happy to answer any questions about the MEP centers or any of the services that centers like MANTEC offer to manufacturers in our specific territories. And again, if you are in the South Central Pennsylvania area, feel free to reach out directly to me. Or if you're not, still reach out to me and I'll connect you with the best person to help assist.
Awesome. Thank you again, Evan. Doesn't seem like anybody. It looks like either I've answered everyone's questions or there wasn't any, nothing was sparked. Thank you everyone for listening. Really appreciate it. Tremendous thank you to MANTEC for their support in working with us on these. And if anyone does have questions, you have our information here. We're not hard to find. So if anybody needs us, please let us know. We're happy to answer questions. As Evan has mentioned, any suggestions, any support that you need, they're ready to go. Kellerman Consulting, the same. Have a great rest of your day and week. And it was a pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.